In front of professors and cameras, she proved to be the brightest mind in the university and turned the 8 million bet into a historic scandal. The dawn in Sao Paulo carried a muted chill, a kind of hesitant freshness that never lasted long in the city. By 7 in the morning, the streets already pulsed with the rhythm of horns, buses exhaling black smoke, and hurried footsteps. On the far side of Avenida Paulista, nestled between high-rise banks and luxury clinics, stood the Mendelssohn University School of Medicine, a palace of glass and marble that gleamed as though sunlight belonged only to its walls. Inside its polished corridors, the scent of waxed floors lingered, but so did another, quieter truth, a hierarchy that divided the ones who were seen from the ones who were invisible. Amanda Miller, 29 years old and 7 months pregnant, moved quietly along the hallway on the 3rd floor, pushing her cart filled with cleaning supplies. Her belly strained against the uniform that was always a size too small, and every step felt heavier than the last. She had tied her blonde hair into a messy knot at the back of her head, strands falling stubbornly against her forehead. To the professors and wealthy students that filled these halls, she was nothing more than a shadow, someone to step around, someone who blended into the silence of tiled floors and disinfectant. But her mind never blended. Her mind still burned. She entered room 304, the lecture hall for advanced medical physics, just as the clock struck 7:15. The seats, arranged in semicircles, looked like an arena for intellectual duels, where equations became weapons sharper than scalpels. Amanda leaned on the mop handle for a moment, her eyes drawn to the blackboard. A fresh equation sprawled across the slate in white chalk, stretching from one side to the other like a mural only half finished. Symbols, Greek letters, an integral, a boundary condition. It was the sort of notation that would have terrified most passers-by. But Amanda stopped breathing for a moment, because she recognized it instantly. It was a dosimetry equation, nuclear medicine at its most intricate. The calculation of absorbed doses in tissue, factoring for biological half-lives, exponential decay, and distribution curves. She could see it not as a puzzle, but as a language, one she had once spoken fluently. Her fingers twitched, itching for chalk, and for an instant her exhaustion dissolved. She remembered nights in the university library when numbers had been her refuge, when she'd chased solutions until sunrise. But now she stood here with a rag in her hand, her swollen ankles aching, reduced to a silhouette cleaning the remnants of other people's brilliance. The door swung open with authority. Richard Rick Mendelssohn entered, tall, impeccably dressed in a navy suit that looked more tailored for a gala than for an early lecture. At 37, he was the youngest university chancellor in the country, heir to both fortune and legacy. He walked with the ease of someone who had never carried weight that wasn't made of gold. Behind him trailed 2 professors, Dr. Charles Ferris and Dr. Helen Sanders, along with a cluster of graduate students who laughed too loudly at his remarks. Rick stopped abruptly when he noticed Amanda by the board. His eyes narrowed, the corners of his mouth tilting into a smile too sharp to be warm. "Well, what do we have here?" he said, his voice carrying that theatrical cruelty reserved for audiences. "The cleaning staff getting an early education?" The students chuckled, trying to mirror his tone. Amanda froze, mop in hand, but did not look away from the equation. "I was just finishing the room," she said quietly, in English tinged with the softness of someone who had studied abroad once upon a time. Rick's eyes flicked to the blackboard. "Do you even know what that is?" he asked, stepping closer. "Or does it just look like graffiti to you?" "Advanced nuclear dosimetry. This equation would take most of my graduate students an hour to attempt, and even then half of them would fail." Dr. Sanders shifted uncomfortably. "Perhaps we should." But Rick lifted his hand. His gaze never left Amanda, as though he had found a new form of entertainment. "Tell me, do you think you can solve it?" His tone dripped with sarcasm, daring her to misstep. Amanda's chest tightened. The sensible thing would have been to smile awkwardly, shake her head, and slip away. But something in her, the hunger that had never been extinguished, the injustice that had forced her from these halls years ago, flared instead. She met his eyes. "Yes," she said. The room stilled. The graduate students whispered, their amusement sharpening into curiosity. Rick laughed, a low sound that echoed against the marble walls. $8 million, he said suddenly, loudly enough that it carried down the hallway. If you solve this right now, in front of them all, I will personally give you $8 million. Gasps erupted. Dr. Ferris frowned. Rick, this is... Witnesses, Charles, Rick interrupted. We'll make it official. A public wager. $8 million. That's more than she'll ever make cleaning floors in 10 lifetimes. Unless, of course, she's afraid. His grin was savage. Are you afraid? Amanda's heartbeat thundered in her ears. She felt the baby move, a small kick against her ribs as if reminding her she wasn't alone. Afraid? Of him? Of their laughter? She had lived with fear long enough. Fear of losing her pregnancy. Fear of never being more than invisible. But here, now, fear gave way to something sharper, dignity. Her dignity. Slowly, she put down the mop, walked to the blackboard, and picked up a stick of chalk. Gasps turned into murmurs. The corridor outside filled as more students pressed in, sensing spectacle. Amanda took a breath, steadying her trembling hand, and began. The chalk screeched slightly as she rewrote the first integral, isolating variables with precision. Each stroke of the chalk awakened a muscle memory buried but not forgotten. She drew upon Laplace transforms, unfolding the function step by step. Her explanation was quiet, but clear. Decay constants, absorbed fractions, Taylor approximations for the exponential tail. The professors leaned forward despite themselves. Dr. Sanders whispered, "She knows what she's doing." Dr. Ferris nodded, astonishment softening his usual sternness. Meanwhile, Rick's smirk wavered, the amusement fading from his eyes. Amanda kept going, her breathing uneven but her mind sharp. 18 minutes passed in suspended silence, broken only by the scratching of chalk. When she finished, she stepped back, chalk dust on her fingers, and the solution gleamed complete across the blackboard. Balanced, elegant, irrefutable. The room erupted. Some students clapped nervously, others stared in awe. Dr. Ferris approached the board, running his hand just short of the equations. "This is correct," he murmured. "Flawlessly correct." Rick's jaw tightened. For the first time that morning, his perfect posture faltered. Amanda turned, belly heavy, eyes blazing, and said in a steady voice, $8 million, Mr. Mendelsohn. That was your promise." The weight of her words landed harder than the chalk ever could. A hush descended, the kind that announces the beginning of something no one can stop. Outside the window, sunlight spilled into the room, lighting Amanda's figure against the blackboard like a prophecy fulfilled. But even then, no one suspected that what had just happened was not the climax, but merely the spark. And then came the sound, someone in the hallway shouting, "Call the press! Call the press!" The word press ricocheted through the crowd like a shot, and Amanda's pulse quickened. She had set something in motion that would not be contained within these walls. The ripple spread quickly. By the time Amanda left room 304 to fetch her card, clusters of students lingered in the hallway, whispering in disbelief, their phones raised to capture every possible angle. A janitor solving a graduate-level nuclear dosimetry equation in less than 20 minutes. It was the kind of anomaly that gnawed at curiosity. Some smirked, assuming it was luck. Others repeated her name like an incantation, as though saying it enough times would summon an explanation. Amanda walked with the weight of eyes on her back. Her heart beat unevenly, and she pressed her palm against her belly to quiet the baby's restless stirring. She tried to steady her breathing, but inside her chest the memories were already waking. The very memories she had buried deep to survive. The press had not yet arrived, but the rumor had reached the administrative wing. Rick Mendelsohn sat in his office with the blinds half closed, his reflection fractured in the glass. His phone vibrated endlessly with messages. What happened in 304? Did she really solve it? Did you promise her $8 million? He leaned back, fingers tightening around his glass of whiskey though it was not even 9 in the morning. His mind replayed the scene, her confidence, the way she had stared at him as though she were not afraid. Something about her face, it lingered, unsettling. He should have recognized her sooner. Amanda Miller. The name hit him like a chord half remembered. He had heard it in faculty meetings years ago. The prodigy student whose GPA broke records, whose research in pediatric dosimetry had caught international attention. She had been everywhere, in journals, in conferences. And then, suddenly, she had vanished. Expelled or withdrawn. He couldn't remember which. He hadn't cared. But now, seeing her covered in chalk dust, standing tall despite her swollen belly. Something in his memory snapped into place. Amanda returned to the storage closet on the ground floor, where she usually took her short break before tackling the next corridor. The fluorescent light flickered above her, casting the cramped room in a weary glow. She sank onto the overturned bucket she used as a chair, pressing her hands together until her knuckles whitened. The silence gave way to memory. She had been 22 when she first stepped into Mendelssohn University, her scholarship letter trembling in her hands. Her family had never owned much. Her mother worked nights at a bakery. Her father had disappeared before Amanda could form a memory of him. The scholarship had been salvation, not just for her, but for the idea that her life could be more than survival. From the start, she had soared, submitting papers that professors used as references, speaking at conferences where seasoned doctors quoted her work. She remembered late nights in the lab, the hum of machinery, the soft glow of monitors reflecting on her tired but eager face. Then came the pregnancy. Not this one, but the first. Sophia. Amanda had carried her through lectures, through exams, through the clinical rotations that demanded her body while her body demanded rest. At 6 months, preeclampsia had struck, her blood pressure threatening to tear her apart. Her doctors had ordered rest, a medical leave. But when she submitted the request, the board, led by the ever-practical Rick Mendelssohn, denied it. Licenses are for illness, not inconveniences, they had said, words that burned into her like acid. Without the leave, her scholarship was void. Without the scholarship, she could not pay tuition. Without tuition, she was expelled. Her professors had protested quietly, but not loudly enough. She remembered packing her books into a box while students hurried past, eyes averted. She remembered the cold rain that day, soaking her shoes as she left the campus carrying a child in her belly and grief in her chest. 3 months later, she delivered Sophia, alive but fragile, while Amanda's dreams of academia lay buried. The knock on the closet door pulled her back. It was Dr. Helen Sanders. Her usually composed face was pale with disbelief. "Amanda, was that really you up there?" Amanda hesitated, then nodded. Helen stepped inside, closing the door behind her. "I remember you now. Your work on pediatric dosimetry. It changed the way I taught my students. But why are you here, cleaning floors?" Amanda met her gaze, steady. "Because your university decided a mother had no place among its scholars." Helen flinched as though struck. Her eyes softened, then hardened again with something that looked like guilt. "Rick won't let this pass quietly. He'll try to twist it, to humiliate you again. Be careful." Amanda allowed herself a faint smile. "I didn't solve that equation for his amusement. I solved it because it was mine to solve. He challenged me, and now he owes me. $8 million, yes. But more than that, he owes me my life back." By mid-morning, the journalists arrived. Carla Mendez, a sharp-eyed investigative reporter from Folha de Sao Paulo, pushed through the crowd at the university gates. She had covered scandals in politics, medicine, and education, but something about the whispers surrounding room 304 drew her in with magnetic force. A janitor solving equations, a millionaire promising millions. If true, this was more than a story. It was a fault line in the hierarchy of the city's elite. Inside, Amanda resumed her duties, though each movement of the mop felt heavier under the gaze of students who now followed her, as though she were part of the curriculum. Some offered awkward congratulations, others asked questions she ignored. But beneath the surface of curiosity was something sharper, fear. If she could dismantle their equations, what else could she dismantle? In Rick's office, the storm grew. His advisors begged him to retract his promise, to claim it had been a joke. But witnesses multiplied, videos circulated, and by noon hashtags trended on Brazilian Twitter. Hashtag 8MILLION, hashtag Amanda Miller, hashtag Faxinerigenio. Rick slammed his fist on the desk. "She wants attention? Fine. We'll give her attention. Let's see how long she lasts when the world remembers her disgrace." But Amanda had already decided. For years, she had carried silence as a shield. Today, the silence would break. In her small apartment, stacked in a drawer beneath layers of folded baby clothes, lay a recorder filled with 47 files, each one a piece of evidence, each one a voice captured in secret meetings where grades were sold, admissions were bought, and Rick Mendelssohn's name echoed in corruption. She had guarded those files for years, waiting for a moment when truth could outweigh fear. That moment had arrived. As the sun climbed high, Amanda returned to room 304, drawn not by duty but by destiny. The blackboard still bore her solution, untouched, a testament that even chalk could carve cracks in marble walls. She traced the final line with her fingertip, whispering to herself, "They think today is about money. But today is about memory. Mine and theirs." And as the crowd swelled again, and as cameras began to roll, Amanda lifted her chin. For the first time in 7 years, she was not invisible. She was inevitable. By the time noon bells echoed faintly through the city, Mendelssohn University no longer felt like a sanctuary of learning. It felt like a stage. Students crowded the courtyards, journalists set up cameras at the gates, and whispers about the $8 million bet became louder than any lecture happening inside. The polished glass of the institution reflected not only sunlight, but also the mounting storm. Amanda walked back through the main corridor carrying her cleaning supplies, though everyone knew her presence was no longer about disinfectant and buckets. Phones followed her, capturing her every step. The footage of her solving the blackboard equation had already circulated online, spliced with captions like "Genius Janitor Destroys Millionaire" and the $8 million challenge. Every click amplified her story, yet none knew the full truth. Inside the administrative wing, Rick Mendelssohn was pacing like a caged animal. His assistant read headlines from her phone, each one worse than the last. "Rick, the press won't let go of this. They're demanding a statement. If you don't." "Silence," he snapped, though his jaw twitched. He hated losing control. It reminded him too much of his father's disappointed frown, the one he had sworn he'd never see reflected on himself. But control was slipping. A cleaning woman had dared humiliate him in his own hall. The council had gathered in the boardroom, murmurs spilling through the heavy oak doors. Amanda arrived flanked by Dr. Sanders and Dr. Ferris, who insisted she be present. The board members turned when she entered, their expressions a mixture of curiosity, disbelief, and thinly veiled disdain. Her uniform was still damp from mopping, but her eyes carried the sharpness of someone who had already bled in these halls. Rick leaned back in his chair, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Miss Miller, or should I say, Dr. Miller? You seem to enjoy theatrics." Amanda didn't flinch. "I didn't write that equation on the board. You did. You mocked me. And you made a promise." "Promises," Rick said smoothly, "made in jest, under duress, are hardly binding. You had witnesses. Professors, students, faculty." Amanda countered, her voice steady. "And you gave a number. 8 million. Do you often joke about sums that could change lives?" The board shifted uncomfortably. Dr. Hale, the senior professor with silver hair and a gravelly voice, cleared his throat. "Rick, the wager was heard by too many. Dismissing it as a joke will not suffice. The university's reputation. The university's reputation rests on rigor, not on janitorial theatrics." Rick snapped. "If we allow this circus, every headline will mock us as a playground for stunts." Amanda stepped closer, her belly brushing against the edge of the table. "Perhaps your reputation was fragile to begin with." The silence was brutal. Sanders looked down to hide her smile. Hale rubbed his temples. Rick's fist tightened against the armrest. "You think this is about you? You think a stunt with chalk erases your past? We know who you were, Amanda. The dropout. The scholarship failure." The word sliced, but Amanda didn't recoil. Instead, she pulled a small object from her bag, a digital recorder, black and unassuming. She set it on the table. "Do you know what this is?" she asked. Rick's eyes narrowed. "A toy." Amanda pressed play. The room filled with a grainy recording. The voice of a student begging for a passing grade. Another voice, recognizably a professor, agreeing in exchange for a donation. Names were spoken. Numbers. Even the sound of glasses clinking in a toast. The board froze. Rick's smirk faltered. "There are 47 of these," Amanda said. "Conversations I kept. Records of corruption. Grades bought. Admissions sold. Futures traded like poker chips. If this university wishes to talk reputation, perhaps we should start there." The board erupted in overlapping voices. "Is this real? She's bluffing. If this leaks." Rick slammed his hand down. "Enough." His face was pale, sweat collecting at his temple. "You dare threaten us?" Amanda's voice was quiet but unshakable. "Not threaten. Remind. You owe me. Not only the 8 million, but the dignity you stripped away when you decided motherhood was weakness. Dr. Sanders leaned forward. She's right. We can't bury this. If the press catches wind. They already have, Amanda cut in. And I have no fear of speaking. The boardroom held its breath. Rick stared at her, hatred and something darker, fear, swimming in his eyes. That was when Carla Mendez appeared in the doorway, notebook in hand, her press badge swinging like a blade. "Excuse me," she said, her voice carrying authority. "Carla Mendez, Folha de Sao Paulo. I hear there's a wager and a whistleblower. Care to comment?" The board's fragile silence shattered. Rick cursed under his breath. And Amanda, for the first time in 7 years, allowed herself the faintest smile. The confrontation had begun. The next morning, Sao Paulo awoke to headlines that blazed across newspapers and screens. Millionaire Dean wagers $8 million against janitor genius. Whistleblower exposes corruption at elite university. The photographs showed Amanda in her uniform, chalk dust on her fingertips, standing before the board like a defendant who had become prosecutor. The image went viral, fueling both admiration and scandal. Amanda sat at her kitchen table in her modest apartment, her daughter Sophia perched across from her, coloring in a tattered book. The baby inside Amanda shifted restlessly, as though sensing the storm outside. She sipped lukewarm tea, her phone vibrating every few seconds with calls from numbers she didn't recognize. She ignored them. She had only one priority: prepare. The unexpected twist came not from Rick, but from the professors. Dr. Ferris and Dr. Sanders visited her at home that afternoon. Their clothes, too formal for her cramped apartment, seemed out of place against the peeling wallpaper and the smell of simmering beans on the stove. "You forced the board's hand," Ferris said, lowering himself carefully onto a chair. "They're panicking. Some want to pay you off quickly. Others want to crush you." Amanda folded her arms. "And you? Which side are you on?" Sanders leaned forward. "The side of truth. I taught you once. I failed you when I didn't fight harder for your leave. Let me make it right now." Amanda studied her face, searching for cracks of insincerity. But Helen's eyes held only guilt and determination. Slowly, Amanda nodded. "The council will meet tomorrow at 1800 hours, Ferris said. "They'll decide your demands." "But Rick, he's already plotting a way out." Amanda smiled faintly. "Let him plot. I have something he doesn't, proof." Meanwhile, in his penthouse office overlooking the city, Rick raged. His lawyer, a sleek man with steel-rimmed glasses, advised caution. Legally, the wager may be dismissed as jest. But the recordings, if authentic, they expose systemic fraud. If she leaks them, accreditation bodies will descend. Donations will evaporate. Rick slammed his glass onto the table, whiskey spilling. "Then we discredit her. Dig into her past. Show the world she's unstable. A mother, abandoned, desperate for money. Paint her as delusional." But as he spoke, his phone buzzed with another headline notification. Former prodigy Amanda Miller, 7 published papers, international recognition. The photos showed a younger Amanda in conference halls, shaking hands with professors from Harvard and MIT. Proof of her brilliance, undeniable. Rick's face darkened. The more he tried to crush her, the more the world remembered her not as a janitor, but as what she had once been, the brightest mind in the room. That night Amanda stood at her window, watching the city lights flicker like stars trapped on Earth. She pressed her hand against her belly and whispered, "We're not invisible anymore." Sophia stirred in her sleep, murmuring, as though hearing the promise. But across town, Rick was also awake, staring at the ceiling of his penthouse. For the first time in his life, he felt the weight of someone he could not buy, silence, or bend. And deep down, beneath layers of pride and rage, a new fear gnawed at him. Not that he would lose money, but that he would lose the story. The twist was clear. Amanda was no longer just a participant in his cruel bet. She was the author of the narrative now, and the narrative was slipping entirely out of his control. By the following morning, Mendelssohn University resembled less a place of study and more a fortress under siege. Protesters had gathered outside its gates, some holding signs that read, "Justice for Amanda," and others chanting slogans against corruption. Students filmed everything, their cameras trained not on lectures, but on the drama unfolding in real time. News vans parked along the boulevard, their satellite dishes tilted skyward like watchful eyes. Inside, alliances began to crystallize. Professors whispered in corners, debating whether to support Amanda's claims or defend the institution. Some feared the collapse of their careers if the scandal deepened. Others, quietly resentful of Rick's unchecked power, saw Amanda as a catalyst for long-awaited change. Amanda herself had spent the night reviewing her recordings, listening to voices that once made her skin crawl. Each file was a memory of betrayal, but also a weapon. Sophia slept beside her, and Amanda stroked her daughter's hair, whispering promises that tomorrow would be different. At 10 o'clock, she entered the faculty lounge with Dr. Sanders at her side. Conversations died instantly. All eyes turned to the woman once invisible, now impossible to ignore. Some professors greeted her with tentative nods, others with thinly veiled hostility. Dr. Joseph Hale stood from his seat, adjusting his glasses. "Amanda Miller," he said, his gravelly voice carrying authority. "You've disrupted the university's order. Some call it courage. Others call it chaos. But one thing is certain, you've forced us to choose sides." Amanda met his gaze steadily. "Then choose truth. You all know what happens here. I just refuse to stay silent about it." A younger professor muttered, "Easy for you to say. You're not risking tenure." Amanda's eyes softened, but her voice was firm. "I lost everything once because this institution decided motherhood was incompatible with brilliance. I have nothing left to lose. But you, if you stay silent, you lose your souls." The room fractured. Some applauded softly. Others left without a word. Divisions were no longer private. They were drawn in sharp lines across the faculty. Meanwhile, Rick gathered his loyalists in the boardroom. He stood before them, a portrait of confidence masking the storm inside. "She is a threat to everything we've built," he said. "She wants to humiliate us publicly. We cannot allow it. I propose we close ranks, deny her claims, challenge her recordings, paint her as vindictive." One professor hesitated. "But what if the recordings are authenticated? What if the council believes her?" Rick's smile was cold. "Then we bury her under the weight of her own past. A single mother, janitorial work, expulsion for failing to maintain scholarship terms. Who will believe she is anything more than desperate for a payout?" Yet even as he spoke, cracks formed in his coalition. Some exchanged uneasy glances, remembering Amanda not as a dropout, but as a brilliant young scholar whose research had once lifted the university's prestige. Loyalty to Rick was loyalty to power, but loyalty to Amanda felt like loyalty to truth. That afternoon, Amanda found an unlikely ally. Carla Mendez, the journalist, approached her outside the cafeteria. "You've got their attention," Carla said, flipping her notebook shut. "But attention isn't enough. If you want real change, you need to control the narrative. Right now it's still Rick's word against yours. Release the recordings, and the tide is yours." Amanda hesitated. "If I release them now, it could destroy innocent students tied to those deals. They'll carry scars they don't deserve." Carla studied her for a long moment. "Then decide what you want more, revenge or justice. They're not the same thing." The words lingered like a thorn. Amanda knew she had to tread carefully. Every step forward risked not just her own future, but the futures of those who had once trusted her. That evening, Rick's office lights burned late into the night. His lawyer outlined a new plan: delay the council's decision, buy time, and wage a public relations war. But Rick barely listened. His thoughts returned again and again to Amanda's calm defiance in the boardroom, her voice echoing louder than his authority. For the first time, he wondered whether this battle was winnable. Alliances had formed. Divisions had deepened. And tomorrow, the battlefield would no longer be confined to the university. It would stretch across the city. The council meeting was set for 6 in the evening. By noon, the university gates swarmed with reporters, their cameras flashing like lightning. The tension was suffocating. Rumors spread that Amanda intended to present more than just recordings. Something larger. Something that could unravel the institution from its core. Amanda walked into room 304 once again, her belly heavy but her steps sure. She looked at the blackboard, still bearing faint chalk stains from the equation she had solved days before. It felt symbolic, as though the board itself had become her ally. Students followed her in, whispering, waiting for the woman who had dared to challenge their dean. Dr. Sanders entered behind her, followed by Dr. Ferris and Dr. Hale. "Are you certain about this?" Hale asked, his voice tinged with worry. Amanda nodded. "Secrets rot when kept in the dark. It's time they see the light." When the council convened, Amanda stood before them not as a cleaner, but as a scholar reclaiming her name. She placed the recorder on the table and, without hesitation, pressed play. The room filled with voices, professors arranging grades in exchange for donations, administrators laughing about students who failed but still graduated, Rick's name invoked as the guarantor of deals. Gasps rippled across the table. Faces paled. Sanders closed her eyes as though in prayer. "This is only a fraction," Amanda said. 47 recordings in total. And they're not just conversations. I have emails, documents, and signed approvals. This isn't rumor. It's fact. Rick's composure cracked. "This is illegal surveillance," he shouted. Amanda met his fury with calm. What's illegal is selling futures. What's illegal is denying a medical leave to a student whose life was at risk. What's illegal is corruption disguised as policy. For a moment, silence. Then Carla Mendez, who had been granted entry as press, spoke. "Miss Miller, are you saying the university knowingly profited from falsifying academic merit?" Amanda's eyes swept across the council. "Yes, and I am proof of its cost. I lost my degree, my career, because I chose life, my daughters and mine, over their deadlines. They erased me, but I am still here." The impact was seismic. Professors who had wavered now found their resolve. Hale leaned forward, his voice gravelly but resolute. "The recordings must be authenticated. But if they are true, the council cannot ignore them." Rick's voice rose again, desperate. "She's manipulating you. She's a disgruntled dropout." "Enough," Sanders cut him off, her voice sharp. "She was our brightest student. She published internationally before most of us. And we threw her away. I will not stand by again." The council murmured, divisions now shifting toward Amanda. Rick's face drained of color. He could feel the balance of power tilting, slipping through his fingers like sand. When the meeting adjourned, the air outside was electric. Reporters swarmed Amanda, microphones thrust toward her. "Do you intend to sue the university? Will you demand the $8 million now? What's your endgame?" Amanda paused, her daughter's face flashing in her mind. Then she said, "Justice, not only for me, but for every student who was silenced, for every mother who was told she didn't belong. I will not rest until this institution restores what it took and becomes what it claims to be." The crowd erupted in cheers, the chants echoing through the courtyard. Rick, watching from an upper window, clenched his fists until his nails dug into his palms. He had underestimated her. What she revealed today was not just corruption. It was a story powerful enough to undo him completely. And deep down, he knew this was only the beginning. By the next sunrise, the university was no longer just an institution. It was the epicenter of a national scandal. News anchors debated Amanda Miller's revelations on morning shows. Politicians tweeted thinly veiled critiques about corruption in academia. Students began to demand open hearings, while parents of alumni whispered about lawsuits. The tide was irreversible. Amanda rose early, her body heavy with pregnancy, yet her spirit restless. Sophia stirred beside her, rubbing sleepy eyes. Amanda kissed her forehead, then sat by the window with a cup of tea, watching Sao Paulo wake. She knew today would change everything. She could no longer step back. The path behind her was gone. At noon, she was summoned once again to the council chamber. The atmosphere inside was suffocating. Wood-paneled walls seemed to lean closer, pressing the weight of history against every breath. The council members, 12 in all, looked older than they had the day before. Fear aged people quickly. Rick sat at the head of the table, his usual composure strained into a brittle mask. His lawyer stood behind him, silent but calculating. Amanda, dressed still in her cleaner's uniform, carried nothing but her recorder and a folder stuffed with documents. Council Chairwoman Margaret Lowell cleared her throat. "Miss Miller, the council has reviewed preliminary evidence. Authenticity tests are underway, but you must understand the gravity of your accusations. If confirmed, they could dismantle this institution." Amanda met her gaze. "Then let it dismantle. Better no institution at all than one built on fraud." Rick slammed his hand on the table. "This is insanity. You want to destroy thousands of students' futures because you feel wronged." Amanda's voice remained calm. "I want to protect those futures. You are the one who sold them." A murmur swept through the chamber. For the first time, it was Rick on the defensive. Then Amanda opened her folder. Beyond the recordings, I've kept emails, grade records, even bank transfers connected to falsified admissions. I've sent copies to independent auditors. Even if you silence me, the truth will surface. The council erupted in shocked whispers. Margaret paled. Sanders allowed herself a flicker of satisfaction. Rick, however, went rigid. For the first time, genuine fear shadowed his features. Amanda pressed on. I am not here just for vengeance. I have demands. You will restore my degree. You will grant me a faculty position in medical physics. You will establish a scholarship fund for mothers in science. And you will pay me the $8 million Rick promised immediately. You dare dictate terms? Rick spat. Amanda's eyes blazed. You dared mock me while I carried a child. You dared deny me when my life was in danger. You dared wager $8 million as though dignity could be bought. Yes, I dare. The room fell silent. A decision hung like a guillotine blade. No matter what the council chose, nothing could return to what it had been. The university had crossed the threshold with Amanda. There was no going back. That night, Amanda walked home through streets lit by neon and headlights. Protesters cheered her name as she passed, their chants echoing against the high walls of Mendelssohn University. She held Sophia's hand tightly. For the first time, she felt not just the burden of her fight, but its possibility. The point of no return had arrived. Tomorrow, the world would witness the consequences. The day after Amanda's ultimatum, the consequences began to spiral beyond anyone's control. The council had promised a decision by evening, but whispers had already escaped. Rumors of corruption, fraud, and backroom deals spread across Sao Paulo's academic community like wildfire. Rival institutions smelled blood. Donors began to reconsider contributions. Recruiters called the press, eager to distance themselves from Mendelssohn University. Amanda sat in her apartment surrounded by stacks of notes, articles, and the soft hum of her daughter's cartoons playing in the background. Every time her phone buzzed with another headline, she wondered if she was prepared for what she had unleashed. Her demands had been bold, but boldness carried weight. That afternoon, Carla Mendez knocked on her door. They're scrambling, the journalist said, pulling up a chair. Half the council wants to negotiate. The other half wants to stall. Rick, he's desperate. He's pushing to declare you mentally unfit. He's already briefing the press with words like unstable and vindictive. Amanda's lips tightened. He underestimates me. Then don't underestimate him, Carla warned. Men like Rick don't collapse quietly. He'll scorch the earth if it means winning. Meanwhile, at the university, Rick paced his office, barking orders. Leak her medical history. She had preeclampsia. Paint her as fragile, hysterical. Find out where she's working, what debt she has. We'll bury her with pity and contempt. But as he plotted, another blow landed. A letter from Harvard's Department of Medical Physics arrived at the council. It confirmed Amanda's past achievements, published articles, citations in international journals, recognition for her work in pediatric dosimetry. The letter, now leaked to the press, painted her not as a dropout but as a prodigy betrayed by her institution. The unexpected consequence was clear. The more Rick attacked, the more Amanda's credibility grew. She was no longer just a janitor fighting for herself. She was a symbol of resilience against elitism and corruption. By evening, thousands had gathered outside the university gates. Mothers carried signs that read "Scholarship for Mothers Now." Students shouted her name. Professors began to issue anonymous statements of support. The narrative had shifted from scandal to revolution. Amanda arrived at the university escorted by Ferris and Sanders. As she stepped onto the courtyard, the crowd roared. She felt the baby move inside her, strong and insistent, as though echoing the cheers. Tears stung her eyes. She had once been invisible here. Now the world was watching. Inside, the council sat in grim silence. Margaret Lowell finally spoke. We cannot contain this. Miss Miller, we will meet your demands. The degree, the position, the scholarship fund. And Rick. Her eyes flicked toward him, sharp as a blade. You will honor your promise. Rick's face drained of color. This is madness. This is justice, Margaret replied. The vote passed, the council's approval carrying the weight of inevitability. Amanda felt her knees weaken, not from pregnancy but from the sheer relief of a wound finally acknowledged. Yet as the decision was announced publicly, Rick's eyes burned with fury. And somewhere deep inside her, Amanda knew this victory carried its own dangers. Because when men like Rick lost power, they didn't vanish. They retaliated. The unexpected consequence of her triumph was the shadow it cast, a shadow that threatened not just her future, but the safety of those she loved. The council's decision reverberated through Sao Paulo like a struck bell. News outlets ran banners declaring Amanda's victory. Students danced in the courtyard, journalists scrambled for interviews, and donors hesitated at the edges of scandal. Yet beneath the noise, silence pooled in darker corners, silence where Rick Mendelsohn plotted. Amanda should have felt triumphant, but triumph came laced with unease. Each time she walked through the university corridors, she felt the eyes of both allies and enemies. Some students looked at her with reverence, others with resentment. The cleaning staff, her friends, hugged her in quiet corners, whispering that she carried their hopes. Professors approached her cautiously, torn between admiration and fear of retaliation. Late one night, Amanda returned to room 304. The blackboard was spotless, its slate polished as though waiting for her hand. She traced it gently, memories pressing in. It was here that her life had shattered once before. Now it was here that she had stitched it back together. Yet something gnawed at her, unfinished business. She opened her folder again. The 47 recordings were only part of the truth. Buried deeper in her files was evidence she had never dared reveal. Proof that Rick himself had intervened in admissions to secure spots for unqualified heirs of wealthy donors. Among them, a senator's son, a tycoon's niece, a judge's grandson. If revealed, it wouldn't just destroy Rick. It would send shockwaves through Brazil's political elite. Dr. Hale discovered this when Amanda showed him the files. His face turned pale. Amanda, if you expose this, you're not just taking down Rick. You'll ignite a fire that could consume the whole university. These names, they're untouchable. Amanda's voice was steady. No one is untouchable. But that night, she lay awake, hand on her belly, listening to Sophia's soft breathing. Could she risk everything? Not just her future, but her daughter's safety, by going against men who wielded both power and vengeance? Meanwhile, Rick sat in his penthouse, whiskey untouched for the first time in weeks. His lawyer spread out Amanda's files, some leaked by a mole inside her circle. Rick's eyes narrowed. So she has more. Political connections. Dangerous ones. The lawyer hesitated. If she releases them, those families will abandon you. They'll turn on the university entirely. Rick leaned back, a dangerous glint in his eyes. Then she must never release them. Not while she's alive to speak. The words hung in the air, half threat, half promise. Buried truths had surfaced, and they carried consequences darker than Amanda had anticipated. The following morning, Carla Mendez cornered Amanda outside the lecture hall. I've seen the names, Carla whispered. My sources confirmed them. If you release this, you'll have the entire political establishment on your back. Are you ready for that? Amanda's answer was quiet, but unwavering. The truth doesn't ask if I'm ready. It demands to be spoken. And with that, the point of no return deepened into something even sharper. The buried truths were no longer just hers. They were loaded weapons, waiting to be fired. The days that followed unfolded with the tension of a tightened bowstring. Amanda's demands had been granted on paper, but in practice, obstacles appeared at every turn. Bureaucrats delayed the diploma issuance. Lawyers questioned the legality of retroactively awarding her a degree. The finance office stalled the transfer of the $8 million. Each delay smelled of Rick's hand. Amanda recognized the tactic. Delay until exhaustion. Delay until the crowd loses interest. Delay until justice fades. But she would not fade again. She began to prepare, not just for paperwork battles, but for the confrontation she knew was coming. She studied her recordings again, cataloging each voice, each exchange. She met with Sanders, Ferris, and Hale, forming a coalition within the faculty. She spoke with student leaders, promising transparency. She even allowed Carla to publish select portions of her files, enough to keep public attention sharp without detonating the political bomb buried in the rest. Rick, meanwhile, sharpened his own weapons. He met privately with donors, assuring them the scandal was exaggerated. He instructed his lawyer to file injunctions against Amanda, accusing her of defamation and unlawful surveillance. He even arranged discreet meetings with men who operated outside the law, men who knew how to silence problems. But Amanda anticipated him. She arranged for her evidence to be duplicated and stored with trusted allies. If anything happened to her, the files would be released to international outlets. Rick's attempts to scare her into silence only tightened her resolve. The confrontation loomed closer when the council scheduled a public assembly, an open session where Amanda's demands, Rick's defense, and the future of the university would be debated before press and faculty alike. It would take place in the great auditorium, a hall built for graduations and inaugurations, not for scandals. Yet scandal had chosen it. On the morning of the assembly, Amanda dressed not in her cleaner's uniform, but in a simple blue dress that stretched over her swollen belly. Sophia clutched her hand tightly as she kissed her goodbye at the apartment door. "Be brave, Mama," the little girl whispered. Amanda smiled, though her eyes stung. Always. At the university, crowds gathered hours before the assembly. Protesters carried banners. Journalists shouted into cameras. Helicopters buzzed overhead. Inside, the auditorium filled with students, professors, donors, and politicians whose children's futures were tangled in the scandal. The air vibrated with anticipation, fear, and hunger for spectacle. Rick stood backstage, his suit flawless, his smile rehearsed, but his hands trembled slightly. He knew this would be the battlefield. Win here, and he could salvage power. Lose, and his empire collapsed. Amanda arrived minutes later, her presence greeted by cheers that shook the hall. She walked slowly, deliberately, each step an act of defiance. She no longer looked like a janitor. She looked like what she had always been, a scholar, a mother, and a warrior of truth. The confrontation had not yet begun, but the stage was set. Every secret, every betrayal, every injustice converged here, in this hall. Amanda inhaled deeply, steadying herself. She knew this was not only about her. It was about every student silenced, every mother denied, every truth buried beneath marble floors. The final battle was coming, and Amanda was ready. The great auditorium of Mendelssohn University pulsed with energy like a living organism. Hundreds filled the seats, students whispering, professors frowning, donors shifting uncomfortably, journalists poised with pens and cameras. Bright lights blazed onto the stage, exposing every twitch, every bead of sweat. The university had never seen such a gathering. At the center stood Amanda Miller, 7 months pregnant, her hands clasped gently over her belly as though anchoring herself. Across from her, Richard "Rick" Mendelssohn sat behind a long table, flanked by lawyers and loyalists. He wore his finest suit, but his eyes betrayed sleepless nights. Between them sat the council, silent judges awaiting a spectacle. Council Chairwoman Margaret Lowell spoke first. "We are here to address the allegations brought forth by Miss Amanda Miller, a former student of this institution, now an employee, and to weigh them against the defense of Chancellor Mendelssohn. Let the record show this proceeding is open to the press and public." The murmurs swelled. Cameras flashed. Amanda felt the baby shift inside her, a reminder that she carried not only her own fate, but the future of a life yet to begin. Rick rose smoothly, his smile carefully painted. "Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed colleagues, we stand today not in pursuit of truth, but in the midst of theater. Miss Miller, though once a promising student, failed to complete her education. She abandoned her scholarship. She now seeks attention and money through fabricated accusations. What we are witnessing is not justice. It is extortion." Gasps fluttered through the crowd. Amanda kept her gaze steady. When it was her turn, she rose slowly, letting silence fall heavy before she spoke. "My name is Amanda Miller. I did not abandon my education. I was forced to leave when this institution denied me medical leave during a pregnancy that nearly killed me. I carried a child while carrying equations, and for that, I was punished." She pulled out the recorder and pressed play. The auditorium filled with voices, professors negotiating grades for donations, administrators laughing about students who failed but still passed. Then came Rick's voice, clear, unmistakable, promising favors to a donor in exchange for millions in funding. The hall erupted. Students shouted, journalists scribbled furiously, some donors shifted toward the exits. Rick's mask cracked for an instant, rage flashing in his eyes. "This is manipulated," he barked. "Taken out of context." But Amanda was not finished. She opened her folder and held up documents. Emails, bank transfers, signatures. "These are not rumors. These are facts. Facts you cannot erase." Margaret Lowell leaned forward, her face pale. Chancellor Mendelssohn, can you deny these documents bear your authorization? Rick faltered. His lawyer tried to intervene, but the momentum had shifted irreversibly. Then Amanda took her final step. And if this counsel hesitates, know this. I have secured duplicates of all files. They are with international media outlets. Should anything happen to me or my children, the full archive will be released. The crowd roared. Cameras clicked like gunfire. Rick stood frozen, caught between fury and defeat. At that moment, Amanda understood. The battle was not about money nor titles. It was about dignity reclaimed in the face of arrogance. And as she looked across the hall, she saw students rising to their feet, clapping, cheering. Her truth had become theirs. The moment of truth had arrived, and Rick Mendelssohn had lost. The aftermath came swiftly, like rain after a storm. Within 48 hours, the council voted to strip Rick of his chancellorship. Donors withdrew their support, accreditation bodies launched investigations, and politicians scrambled to distance themselves from the scandal. Rick vanished from public view, his empire crumbling into silence. Amanda, meanwhile, stood at the center of a transformation she had ignited. The university granted her diploma, retroactively honoring her degree in medical physics. They offered her a faculty position, and she accepted, not as a trophy, but as a promise to the students who now looked at her with hope. The $8 million arrived in her account within a week. Amanda used part of it to secure a home for her daughters, part to establish the scholarship fund for mothers in science. Applications poured in within days. Young women who had once believed academia closed to them now dared to dream. Months passed. Amanda's belly gave way to a newborn daughter, strong and healthy. She balanced lectures with sleepless nights, equations with lullabies. In her new laboratory, sunlight streaming through tall windows, she led research that would soon revolutionize pediatric radiotherapy. Trials with Harvard and MIT showed a 40% reduction in side effects for children. Nature Medicine published her findings, and the world listened. Students crowded her lectures, not because of her fame, but because of her honesty. She taught physics as numbers, yes, but also as stories, stories of resilience, of ethics, of why science mattered beyond the chalkboard. Sophia, her eldest, grew into a bright teenager who wandered the lab with curious eyes, sometimes sketching the machines in her notebook, sometimes asking questions Amanda answered with pride. And one quiet afternoon, years later, Amanda walked once more into room 304. The blackboard was clean, waiting. A young woman in a janitor's uniform stood by the door, pregnant, mop in hand, her face heavy with fatigue. Amanda approached her gently and offered a smile. "Would you like to sit for a moment?" she asked. The woman blinked, surprised at the kindness. Amanda guided her to a chair, then picked up a piece of chalk and began to write. Not an equation, but a message. You belong here. The circle had closed. What had begun as humiliation had become legacy. Amanda Miller was no longer invisible. She was inevitable. And in the silence of room 304, history felt less like a weight and more like a horizon, wide and waiting. If you made it this far, leave us a comment telling us where you're watching from today and what you thought of the story. If you can, share this video with your friends and family, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to receive new videos. A big hug, and see you tomorrow.